profound sorrow. Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen,
Will Prince William take the throne immediately following King Charles, or does Queen Camilla hold a hidden claim to the crown? That is the question dominating public discussion, but a sudden, high-priority broadcast from the Buckingham Palace communications desk has just thrown the entire British media into an absolute frenzy. A definitive, legally binding announcement regarding Queen Camilla's future role and sovereign status. Nobody expected King Charles to authorize such a massive administrative shift while navigating the current political season. But the cold, clear terms of this palace statement prove that the inner circle has made a definitive choice, and the future of the court has just been permanently rewritten. The red-crested notice on the palace gates. A senior palace clerk walked across the gravel courtyard of Buckingham Palace at precisely 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. He wore a traditional dark blue administrative uniform and carried a large glazed mahogany frame. Two Metropolitan Police protection officers cleared a path through the standard crowd of tourists gathered near the center of the structure. The clerk stepped up to the primary black iron gates, lifting the frame onto a specialized wrought iron mounting bracket that had been welded to the metal bars decades ago. He snapped the security latches shut, locking the document into public view. The document inside the frame was a formal set of signed letters patent. The thick white paper carried a heavy crimson wax seal at the bottom right corner, displaying the intricate personal coat of arms of King Charles. The top of the page featured the bold red typography used exclusively by the Privy Council office for major constitutional declarations. Within 30 seconds of the clerk stepping back, dozens of international press photographers surged against the security barriers. They raised their long telephoto lenses, their shutters clicking continuously as they zoomed in on the sharp black text, detailing the immediate changes to Queen Camilla's executive powers. The administrative facts of the announcement sent a shockwave through the media teams parked along the mall. This was not a standard health update or a casual promotional brief about upcoming autumn charity galas. It was a legally binding restructuring order. The text outlined a sweeping series of modifications to the internal governing charters of the royal household. The decree had been drafted under an accelerated legislative timeline, carrying an effective operational date for immediate execution by the palace bureaucracy. The central authority of the Queen Consort was being fundamentally remapped by a direct sovereign command. The publication of this specific document created an immediate tactical crisis for the television news crews, broadcasting live from the pavement outside. They had to translate the dense, 17th century legal phrasing of the letters, patent for millions of viewers watching the midday news feeds. The document systematically reallocated the administrative priorities within the household management committees. For the past 2 years, Camilla had operated as a co-signatory on multiple internal boards that governed the distribution of the crown's peripheral assets. The new notice dismantled that parallel authority structure, returning total centralized control to the sovereign's primary administrative team. The tension generated by this sudden display became a physical presence inside the palace registry office. The clerks watching the live news feeds on their monitors realized that their daily administrative routines were being permanently disrupted. Under the previous guidelines, any major expenditure regarding the maintenance or redecoration of the private state apartments required a joint signature from both the King's private secretary and the Queen's financial controller. The red-crested notice explicitly deleted the Queen's office from the signature rotation, leaving her staff entirely dependent on the centralized approval of the King's core treasury team. This sudden public execution introduces a profound constitutional mystery into the heart of the current reign. Why would King Charles choose to authorize a highly visible, legally binding reduction of his own wife's executive powers during a period of intense public scrutiny regarding royal transition plans? The answer lies inside a secure filing vault at the London High Court Probate Registry. Legal researchers discovered that a series of ancient estate acts passed during the early 19th century prohibit a queen consort from holding direct trustee status over the sovereign's private investment portfolios if those assets are scheduled for early consolidation ahead of a future transition of power. The financial data contained within the new letters patent provides the concrete explanation for the sudden move. The sovereign's private investment portfolios encompass billions of pounds in international equities, historic land holdings, and private real estate assets completely separate from the public crown estate. Camilla had previously held a lifetime trustee position on the primary advisory board that managed the distribution of these liquid billions. The bold announcement officially revoked that trustee status, stripping her office of its independent ability to allocate capital or influence the long-term investment strategy of the family fortune. The reaction from the major financial institutions in the City of London was immediate and precise. Senior equity managers tracking the royal trusts noted that the management permissions for the primary family accounts were updated on the central bank network within 10 minutes of the notice being locked to the palace gates. The administrative keys to the empire's private wealth were being systematically transferred to a new custodian. The Queen Consort's financial controller was officially locked out of the primary transaction screens, reducing her office's role to a purely ceremonial capacity with zero independent economic leverage. The mystery now shifts directly away from the public gates of the palace and moves behind the tightly guarded walls of the Sandringham House Library. A group of high-profile estate lawyers had spent 48 hours huddled around an oak table over the weekend, hammering out the exact wording of this administrative strike, while the public believed the family was simply enjoying a quiet country retreat. The true depth of the internal court battle was about to be exposed, revealing that the bold announcement was merely the final, visible stage of a massive structural trap designed to lock the future of the monarchy into an entirely new era. The secret meetings in the Sandringham Long Library. King Charles sat at a long oak table in the center of the Sandringham House Library at 9 o'clock on a rainy Saturday morning. He held a thick pair of silver reading glasses up to his eyes, scanning a row of figures printed on a financial spreadsheet. Directly across from him sat Prince William, who was leaning over a black leather binder containing the original text of the 1993 Sovereign Trust Act. Two senior estate attorneys from a top-tier firm based in the City of London stood near the fireplace, holding large stacks of freshly stamped probate deeds. The physical atmosphere inside the room was entirely focused on legal and administrative business. A green glass desk lamp cast a sharp light over the papers, illuminating several red ink stamps that read, "Restricted Archive." Outside the tall windows, a heavy downpour soaked the lawns of the Norfolk estate. The king picked up a blue fountain pen and flipped to the final signature page of a document titled the Sovereign Asset Consolidation Act. He did not look at his son as he signed his initials in the margin. The concrete facts of this weekend meeting reveal a highly organized effort to restructure the family fortune ahead of any future transition of power. The estate attorneys had spent 3 weeks compiling a comprehensive audit of the Crown's private properties, offshore investments, and liquid cash reserves. The audit had been triggered by an unexpected legislative update regarding the management of high-value royal trusts. The new guidelines required the sovereign to clarify the exact succession path for all private assets to avoid future inheritance tax disputes with the Inland Revenue. William had been pushing for this clarification for several months. He sat back in his chair and adjusted his watch, looking directly at the senior attorney. He wanted a definitive guarantee that the primary cash reserves would remain locked within the central line of succession, completely independent of any discretionary claims by the Queen Consort's office. The financial data showed that Camilla's administrative team had been quietly draft planning a series of long-term property endowments for her biological children, utilizing the interest generated by the sovereign's private funds. The presentation of these specific endowment plans injected an immense wave of fresh tension into the room. Charles looked down at the signature page, his face tight as he realized his father's past trust structures were being utilized to fund individuals who performed zero public duties for the state. Under the historic guidelines of the Sandringham Trust, the king held the absolute veto power to dissolve any parallel funding lines, but doing so required a formal, public declaration of intent via the Privy Council. Charles had spent his entire reign trying to avoid an open, legal confrontation with his wife's legal team. This brings us to a profound structural mystery that the estate attorneys had been working to resolve for 48 hours. How could the king strip his own wife of her lifetime trustee status without inviting an immediate, highly damaging lawsuit from her private solicitors? The answer lay inside a confidential administrative clause signed by Queen Elizabeth during her Golden Jubilee celebrations. The clause explicitly stated that any royal trustee positions held by a spouse are entirely contingent on the continuous maintenance of an approved public service calendar. If the trustee's office attempts to allocate funds for private family endowments, the sovereign holds the immediate legal right to revoke their position without a formal court hearing. Camilla's personal legal representatives discovered the trap on Thursday afternoon. Her private secretary had noticed a series of unusual data transfers between the Palace Registry Office and the High Court Probate Registry. She immediately filed a formal administrative protest with the clerk of the Privy Council, demanding an emergency freeze on any modifications to the Sandringham Trust framework. She argued that the Queen Consort held an unbreakable right of co-signatory authority over all private family investments, and any attempts to alter that authority without her written consent would constitute a direct breach of her original marriage contract. The King's Privy Council overruled the protest within 2 hours of the submission. The councillors produced the original 1993 trust deeds, proving that the sovereign's private wealth is a unique constitutional entity that cannot be bound by standard matrimonial law. The king holds absolute, unreviewable autonomy over the distribution of the family fortune, meaning that Camilla's marriage contract possessed zero legal leverage over the central line of succession. The protest was stamped as legally invalid, clearing the path for the secret weekend meetings to proceed without any further interference from the Queen's office. The final data entries were locked into the palace computer network at midnight on Saturday, permanently deleting Camilla's financial team from the primary account access screens. The keys to the empire's private wealth were now firmly in the hands of Prince William's core treasury team. The attorneys packed their documents back into their leather cases, leaving behind a single signed copy of the letters patent for the King's private secretary to transport back to London. The quiet country retreat had served its true purpose. The trap had been flawlessly executed behind closed doors, and the future court had successfully secured its absolute financial dominance over the entire institutional framework of the crown. The sudden transition to the future court. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, signed her name on the bottom of a blue parchment document inside the study at Adelaide Cottage at 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon. The paper carried the fresh signature of the King's personal private secretary. Her chief protection officer stood near the doorway, holding a leather transit pouch containing duplicate copies of the newly minted palace mandate. Catherine did not make a public statement. She blotted the ink, closed the leather binder, and handed the packet directly back to the courier. The concrete facts of this new mandate permanently reorder the internal hierarchy of the royal residences. The text systematically transfers the primary right of refusal over the Crown's private residential properties directly to the Princess of Wales. For decades, the reigning Queen Consort held the exclusive power to manage the deployment of the family's country estates, vacation lodges, and residential cottages. She could allocate these properties to personal friends or extended family members without consulting the younger branch of the family. The new letters patent officially delete that traditional privilege from Camilla's office ledger. This sudden transfer of residential authority created an immediate, tangible tactical crisis within the household management departments. Camilla's senior advisors had spent the early morning finalizing a long-term lease agreement for a historic estate house on the borders of Windsor Great Park. They intended to allocate the property to a prominent member of Camilla's biological family for a nominal rental fee. The moment the new mandate was logged onto the central server network, the automated transaction system canceled the lease routing, marking the property status as transferred to the future court. The transition introduces a highly restrictive mystery regarding the long-term living arrangements of the Queen Consort. Royal biographers discovered a hidden clause embedded deep within the third page of the estate framework. The clause deals explicitly with a scenario involving a sudden change of reign, tied directly to the king's ongoing health challenges. Under standard historical protocol, a widowed queen consort traditionally retains her access to the primary state apartments until she chooses to voluntarily relocate. The new mandate completely overrides that historical courtesy, dictating a highly rigid timeline for her removal from the capital. The legal facts of the hidden clause state that in the event of a transition of power, Camilla must completely vacate her apartments at Buckingham Palace and Clarence House within 60 days. The document designates a specific dower house located in a remote sector of Wiltshire as her mandatory permanent residence. This property is entirely self-funding, meaning she will be legally barred from drawing any security or maintenance allowances from the Central Duchy of Cornwall revenues. The future court has effectively built a legal wall around the geographic center of London, ensuring that Camilla's inner circle will be completely removed from the seat of power the moment the current reign concludes. The tension over this discovery quickly spread to the wardrobe and diary departments. Catherine's team now holds the absolute veto power over the allocation of the historic family jewelry vaults and formal state carriages. If Camilla wishes to deploy a specific piece of ancestral jewelry for an upcoming diplomatic reception, her staff must submit a formal request through the Adelaide Cottage Clearing Office. The Queen Consort has been reduced to a secondary ceremonial actor within her own home, stripped of her independent ability to dictate the visual presentation of the court. The financial data supporting this structural squeeze reflects a total consolidation of wealth around the direct bloodline. Prince William's core treasury team has successfully integrated all peripheral estate accounts into a single, centralized digital registry. This move prevents any unauthorized cash transfers or private property endowments from occurring behind closed doors. The future court has taken absolute control of the institution's liquid billions, leaving the current Queen's office entirely dependent on a fixed administrative salary that can be reviewed by parliamentary auditors at the end of the fiscal year. The mystery now shifts directly to the reaction brewing inside the office of the Prince of Wales, who spent the afternoon reviewing the updated security logs for the Windsor estate. William has made it entirely clear to his advisors that he will not compromise on the enforcement of the new letters patent. He views the total centralization of the Crown's wealth as the only practical way to guarantee the survival of the monarchy during a period of national economic transition. The quiet prince has successfully executed a masterpiece of institutional warfare, and the Queen's family has been permanently pushed to the absolute fringes of the court. Why Prince William refused to back down. Prince William adjusted his grip on a heavy black land ledger inside the estate office at Adelaide Cottage at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. He stood before a large white whiteboard that displayed a detailed organizational chart of the royal family's peripheral funding structures. His principal private secretary stood next to him, holding an active digital tablet displaying real-time banking transfers. William picked up a red felt pen, drew a heavy circle around a box marked discretionary consort subsidies, and drew a thick diagonal line straight through it. The operational facts of the case reveal a massive financial cleanup strategy that had been playing out behind the scenes for 18 months. William had initiated a comprehensive forensic audit of all funds flowing from the Duchy of Cornwall and the sovereign's private inheritance portfolios. The final report, compiled by an independent auditing firm in the City of London, sat on his desk in a 3-inch thick binder. The data proved that the operational costs of maintaining parallel administrative and public relations teams for Queen Camilla's non-royal family members had escalated by 42% since the change of reign. William looked down at the specific figures detailing the monthly travel allowances and residential security grants provided to Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. These individuals do not hold any official royal titles. They perform zero public duties on behalf of the British state. Yet, the palace accounting machinery had been routinely routing tens of thousands of pounds from the central discretionary accounts to subsidize their private country properties and international travel logistics. William told his secretary that using ancestral crown wealth to fund a parallel non-working court structure was entirely finished. The tension over this strict fiscal discipline came to a head when King Charles's personal solicitor attempted to present a compromise proposal drafted over the weekend. The solicitor arrived at the cottage carrying a draft agreement that would allow Camilla to retain her lifetime trustee position on the primary investment board, provided she agreed to a 20% reduction in her family's discretionary subsidies. The king wanted to patch over the domestic conflict quickly, fearing that an open, legal dispute would undermine the image of absolute stability he wanted to project to the public during a highly sensitive political season. William rejected the compromise proposal within 2 minutes of the presentation. He stated that the era of managing the family fortune through informal compromises and behind-the-scenes favors was completely over. He pointed out that the British Treasury was currently conducting an annual review of the royal family's tax-exempt status. If the parliamentary auditors discovered that billions of pounds in private royal trusts were being utilized to enrich private citizens, The entire independent wealth of the crown could face immediate legislative intervention. Protecting the long-term survival of the monarchy required absolute transparency, and William refused to back down from the total centralization of the funds. The financial data regarding the global equity markets supported his unyielding stance. The Duchy of Cornwall, which William owns entirely, generates over £21 million in annual net surplus. By combining this immense economic power with the king's personal asset consolidation order, William effectively controlled the entire financial infrastructure of the court. He used this leverage to systematically shut down the Queen Consort's parallel administrative network, proving to the entire palace bureaucracy that he was entirely prepared to absorb the immediate domestic anger of his stepmother to secure the financial perimeter of his future reign. This bold strategy introduces an interesting structural mystery regarding the timing of the bold announcement. Why would the Prince of Wales choose to enforce such a severe, visible reduction of the Queen's powers at this exact moment? The answer lies in a specific statutory deadline set by the National Audit Office. The palace was required to submit its finalized 10-year financial projection model to Parliament by the end of the month. By stripping Camilla of her trustee status before the paperwork was filed, William ensured that her non-royal relatives were permanently scrubbed from the official long-term ledger, leaving them with zero ability to lay claim to the crown's wealth in the future. The mystery was fully resolved when the central banking network confirmed that the management permissions for the primary family investment accounts had been updated. The Queen's financial controller was officially locked out of the transaction screens, reducing her office's independent budget to a fixed administrative salary that can be reviewed by parliamentary auditors at the end of the fiscal year. William had successfully utilized his sovereign authority to execute a flawless administrative strike, proving to every courtier inside the building that the keys to the kingdom were now firmly within his grasp, and no amount of behind-the-scenes pressure could rewrite the new rules of the court. Panic and whispers. Across the palace corridors, the automated email system inside the Clarence House administrative offices triggered a high-priority system notification at precisely 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning. A senior database coordinator sat at her computer terminal, watching as her access permissions to the Central Royal Scheduling Registry were systematically revoked. A red warning dialog box flashed across her screen, displaying a short message from the palace IT security team: access denied via letters patent directive. Within 5 minutes, similar system lockouts occurred on 30 distinct computers across the entire household management department, throwing the building's permanent bureaucracy into a state of absolute, unmitigated chaos. The physical reality of the panic was immediately visible in the ground floor briefing rooms overlooking the inner courtyard. Wardrobe directors, transport clerks, and personal security schedulers abandoned their morning administrative tasks to huddle around the central service desks. They were looking at a printed copy of the red-crested notice that had been pulled from the palace gates the previous afternoon. The technical assistants who managed Queen Camilla's daily travel manifests were frantically trying to figure out how to route their upcoming autumn logistics without access to the primary sovereign accounts. The structural reality of the new mandate meant that every single request for a vehicle, a security detail, or an estate maintenance grant now had to be routed through Prince William's core treasury team at Adelaide Cottage. The internal operational facts of the palace infrastructure explain why this sudden shift in power created such an immediate state of administrative paralysis. For over 2 decades, the royal household had operated under a highly decentralized, parallel authority structure. Camilla's office maintained its own independent budget allocation, allowing her private secretary to authorize thousands of pounds in discretionary spending for short-term media campaigns, luxury design consultants, and private travel arrangements for her extended biological family. The new letters patent systematically deleted that parallel authority structure from the ledger, reducing the Queen Consort's office to a purely ceremonial branch with zero independent financial leverage over the permanent workforce. The tension within the building escalated rapidly as the senior household staff members realized that continuing to follow the Queen's direct commands could constitute an act of corporate insubordination against the King's primary treasury directives. The master of the household called an emergency meeting of all department heads in the main briefing room at 10 o'clock. He sat at the center of the table, holding a black leather binder containing the updated royal household regulations. He made it entirely clear to the assembled staff that any clerk who authorized a transaction or allocated a palace asset without a verified digital signature from William's Adelaide Cottage team would face immediate suspension and a formal review by the Treasury solicitors in London. This strict administrative alignment completely isolated Camilla's inner circle within the geography of the building. Her personal assistants and public relations directors found themselves entirely cut off from the internal communication channels that run the day-to-day operations of the court. When her media director attempted to distribute a pre-approved press release regarding an upcoming solo charity appearance at a London art gallery, the Central Press Office refused to push the text to the national media pack. The press secretary stated that under the new letters patent, all public relations materials originating from the Queen's office had to undergo a formal veto review by the Prince of Wales's communications team before any public distributions could be finalized. The situation introduces an interesting psychological mystery regarding the reactions of the permanent workers who run the domestic infrastructure of the royal residences. For years, the household staff had quietly accommodated the parallel demands of the current reign, adjusting scheduling logs and wardrobe allocations to prevent any visible friction between the different royal offices. But the moment the red-crested notice was finalized on the gates, that compliance vanished entirely. The chefs in the Buckingham Palace kitchens, the security wardens at Windsor Castle, and the stable hands at the Royal Mews immediately closed ranks around the traditional line of succession. They recognized that the true long-term survival of their jobs and the institution itself depended entirely on following the strict fiscal discipline mapped out by the future king. The financial data compiled by the palace accountants during the afternoon shift change confirmed the total devastation of Camilla's corporate influence. Her private secretary received a formal memorandum from the Central Treasury Office detailing the new, fixed administrative salary allocated to her household for the remainder of the fiscal year. The document showed that her discretionary spending cap had been slashed by exactly 60%, effectively terminating her ability to hire external public relations consultants or fund private security details for her children. Every single penny of her office expenditures was now subject to an annual review by parliamentary auditors, stripping away the veil of financial secrecy that had protected her family's subsidies for years. The mystery now shifts to the long-term impact this internal isolation will have on the public presentation of the monarchy during the upcoming autumn season. Camilla's public relations team spent the late afternoon sitting in their locked offices, listening to the continuous news packages broadcasting from the television monitors on the wall. They realized that their ability to project an image of senior, independent royal authority had been permanently broken by a single administrative strike. The building's bureaucracy had completely adapted to the new rules within 24 hours, leaving the Queen Consort's inner circle completely stranded on the absolute margins of the court, while the future king tightened his grip on the entire wealth and infrastructure of the crown. A monarchy locked into a new era. The official transfer of the constitutional authority framework was officially typed into the secure database at the London High Court Probate Registry at precisely 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. A senior court archivist, wearing specialized protective gloves, pressed the final button on his digital console to lock the encryption keys over the newly processed files. This definitive administrative act permanently registered the king's new letters patent into the public archives of the British state. The physical parchment documents, bearing the dark crimson impression of the heavy wax seal, were carefully moved into a secure, fireproof archival box, located deep beneath the foundational stones of the Strand building, closing the door on any future behind-the-scenes legal attempts by the Queen Consort's advisors to overturn the new restrictions. The public reaction to the finalization of this historic notice quickly transformed the cultural and media landscape across the entire United Kingdom. Outside the iron railings of Buckingham Palace, national television news crews spent the late afternoon broadcasting live packages under the bright summer sun. They stood next to the black iron gates, pointing their cameras at the empty wrought iron bracket, where the red-crested notice had hung just 48 hours earlier. The public discussion across the country was no longer about the day-to-day public engagements of the family. The conversation was entirely focused on the fact that the future of the court had been completely and transparently secured by Prince William's core treasury team. The financial data resulting from this structural finalization permanently anchors the wealth of the British monarchy to the direct bloodline. By systematically stripping Queen Camilla of her lifetime trustee status over the sovereign's private investment portfolios, the new letters patent have placed the family's liquid billions entirely out of reach of peripheral non-royal family members. Every single property deed, commercial land lease, and offshore investment fund has been integrated into a single, centralized digital registry managed exclusively from Adelaide Cottage. The era of treating ancestral crown assets as a private funding pool for extended step-families has been completely eradicated from the ledger, ensuring that the wealth of the crown remains fully insulated from public or parliamentary criticism. This structural alignment introduces a profound historical finality into the geographic organization of the modern court. Royal biographers discovered that the hidden clause embedded within the third page of the estate framework mandates a complete, mandatory relocation for Camilla the exact moment the current reign concludes. She will be legally required to vacate her apartments at Buckingham Palace and Clarence House within 60 days of a change of reign. Her designated permanent residence will be a quiet, self-funding dower house located in a remote sector of Wiltshire, completely removing her inner circle from the central geographic focus of the capital. The future court has effectively drawn a sharp perimeter around the seat of power, ensuring that the transition to the next generation will proceed with absolute, unyielding continuity. The tension within the palace corridors slowly began to stabilize as the senior household staff members fully accepted the reality of the new chain of command. The wardrobe directors, transport clerks, and personal security schedulers adjusted their daily administrative routines to match the centralized database protocols. They recognized that the true long-term survival of the institution depended entirely on following the strict fiscal discipline mapped out by the Prince of Wales. Camilla's private public relations department was effectively absorbed into the Central Palace Communications Office, leaving her media team entirely powerless to launch any independent promotional campaigns without facing an immediate charge of corporate insubordination against the Crown. The final mystery of this massive structural transformation rests on how the current working royals will deploy their centralized authority during the upcoming autumn season. Court insiders confirm that Princess Catherine has already assumed full control over the registry of the historic family jewelry vaults and formal state carriages, utilizing the new clearing office at Adelaide Cottage to manage the visual presentation of the court. The Quiet Prince has successfully executed a masterpiece of institutional warfare, redrawing the ultimate boundaries of power behind closed doors. King Charles has successfully secured the financial perimeter of his future reign, proving to the entire world that within the ancient walls of the British monarchy, the future has taken absolute control, and the new era is permanently locked into place. The ultimate lines of power have just been redrawn inside the British monarchy. Buckingham Palace has delivered a stunning, definitive verdict on Queen Camilla's future, proving that Prince William's vision of a lean, centralized court is already being locked into place by the senior guard. This bold announcement marks a permanent shift that the old guard cannot undo, completely removing the Parker Bowles family from the central line of succession. What is your immediate reaction to the King's sudden decision to strip Camilla of her executive powers? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. To stay ahead of every major royal update and exclusive media analysis,